My man, Jonathan, good to see you again, buddy.
Dude, you've gotten professional at this, my man. This is I've been out the game, I guess, too long, man. This is legit. You look good. The camera's crazy. I'm tripping. I need to get me a new camera, man.
This is a long time coming. It was a big upgrade process to get this working, but I don't know. I think it worked out okay.
It looks good, man. It looks really, really good, man. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited. It's a good
When was
conversation.
when was the last time? When was the last time you came on? Like a year ago? Was it late last year?
I think it was a year ago. Yeah, man. I don't think it's been in 2024. Like 2024 has been. I haven't had a lot of Will Spencer time in general. I'm a little upset about that, man.
Oh well, we get time now. It looks like we're live on YouTube. I'm just checking the stream there.
Good.
Looks like we're there. Okay, cool. We're good.
It's good.
So real quick, let me just check if we're live on Twitter. We should be.
Oh man,
Yeah, this is all the things are happening.
that's good, man. I'm
Yeah.
excited. This is a trip. It's a trip to have it all lit up. You're proud of me though. I got a light in my room, so now I don't look like I'm in a dark cave somewhere like I am usually on these.
You're not going to disappear into the background as the sun goes down.
Today is my day. I got light. We're good.
You look good, man. It's good to see you. Look lean, man. You look like you've been working out, getting after
Working out, and then I think, man, like I spent a long time doing the like bulk cut deal.
Yeah.
And I just somehow kept on bulking, and I ended up looking like a Jimmy Dean sausage, and so I'm not really interested in that aesthetic anymore. If that's okay.
That's fine with me. I don't want to body shame you. That's not what we do.
Yeah. You know what? Well, look, I body shame myself. I look like a baked potato, a cross between a baked potato and Jimmy Dean sausage, and I didn't like it. Oh, I didn't like it.
It's that kind of day.
Yeah, man. It's not Monday. It's Tuesday. Feels like a Monday though, man.
Feels like a Monday. All right. Well, let's get into it. You told me we started talking a couple weeks ago about the Diddy revelations, and I was asking you like what the impact on the Black community was around that, considering what a big deal Diddy is, rap music, and how much it's so central to the identity of Black Americans. And P. Diddy, Tupac, Biggie, all these different guys, they're the pillars in many ways. And so now you have one pillar where it's like it's revealed, as many people knew, I think, as you and I had discussed, that it was fully corrupt. But before we get to that, after that, you pointed me to this beef that was going on between Kendrick Lamar and Drake. And so I went and I listened to, it's like an hour's worth of music the two of them produced. And now I didn't hear anything about this. This might be one of the biggest things to ever happen in rap music. Like, it's just incredible what I just listened to. And I don't like rap. I don't listen to rap. But I listened through these tracks. I'm like, this is actually really culturally significant in America. So let's talk about this first, because I don't know how many people know about it. I'm sure tons of people know about it. But
no, I mean it's worth knowing about, because it's like what you and I were talking about offline. Like the beef really represented, I think, what's going on culturally with us, with Black Americans. So all right.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, Drake is a huge household name, global icon in the like rap, but like he's a little bit more like commercial pop angle.
Yeah.
And you have Kendrick Lamar, who's also like well known, relatively household name, but he's a little bit more, I would say, for the culture, and he would actually say the same thing, I think. And he says as much in a lot of his lyrics. So this summer, for whatever reason, Drake decided to go after Kendrick. And rap beef is not like uncommon, right? Every Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls, they had a beef running, Ja Rule and 50 Cent. Like these are things, beef happens. It's a thing that does two things. Number one, it establishes who the best rapper is, which is like the competition, but also it bolsters sales for both parties involved.
Right.
If they come correct. Big if they come correct. So for whatever reason, Drake decided to come after Kendrick. And Drake, like, when I say he's like globally known, like it's like if I'm trying to put it into terms, it's like Drake is almost like I don't really know what I want to say here, but it's almost like a Taylor Swift or a Lady Gaga of rap.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That's significant. Okay. Kendrick is also significant, but in a very, very cultural way, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Like not mainstream in the sense that, I mean, he is mainstream, but he's not for mainstream, if that makes sense. There's a difference. And Drake is very much for mainstream. So what happened during this beef, and I got tuned into it because I was, you know, I'm a dad, I'm a husband. I'm not like tuned into like rap beef like that. I got bills to pay, I got mouths to feed. But obviously you hear stuff at the barbershop, you hear stuff when you're around friends, and you learn about what's going on. So Drake came after Kendrick, and it was a situation where Drake would drop a diss track saying a lot of salacious stuff about Kendrick, that he was his wife, that he was somebody that wasn't really for Black culture, blah, 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 blah. And he would drop a diss track, and then like within 24 hours, Kendrick would drop a diss track. And then he dropped another one the same day. And then Drake would drop 2. And then Kendrick would drop 3. And it just went back and forth for like 2 weeks like this. To the point where how many tracks was it? I can't even remember. I think it was
like 10 tracks total.
10 tracks total, back and forth, them just going at each other. And so what I was telling you offline is really what happened with that. And you can kind of see I would say the crescendo of the beef happened with Kendrick's song called They Not Like Us. Yeah. And what happens in that song is something that's really interesting, because what Kendrick is wanting to paint a picture of is that there are those guys over there, right? What you could call the Diddy industrial complex is what I'm going to call it, that are culture vultures, which are taking aspects of Black culture, bringing out some of the like worst components of it for, you know, profit, frankly, and for leverage in media. And so you have that cohort, but then you have the people, and specifically Kendrick represents, you know, South Central LA, typically like lower income type of stuff. He doesn't necessarily represent like a guy that grew up in the burbs, right? But he represents that culture. Okay, so what he's trying to get at in They Not Like Us is really this idea that those guys, the culture vultures, don't speak for us. Those aren't our people. They sell to us, they pimp us out so that they can really gain all the power and prestige that they want, but they're not really about uplifting and elevating Black people. And that's what Kendrick is trying to represent. And so They Not Like Us actually was so he got this guy DJ Mustard. He got DJ Mustard to make the beat, and so the beat kind of has this like kind of bounce to it, and so he's able to like weave in this very like conscious perspective over like a club beat. And so it ends up becoming this anthem that people are playing at weddings, they're playing at the club. It's this whole thing that eventually ended up, you know, they wanted him to do the Super Bowl. Like his song was so popular that they're like, hey, we got to get this guy on the Super Bowl. It was like a cultural phenomenon. And so the significance of that, and me and you talked about this offline, is that, and I'm serious about this, there's something that's happening, I think, with Big B, like Black culture. There's obviously a bunch of subcultures within that, but Big B Black culture is very much taking back their identity. And it's really, really cool to watch. And it's cool that we have a song to it. It's cool that there's a song to it now. And I wouldn't say that Kendrick is some kind of like hero or a guy that's like gospel centered or anything like that.
Right.
But I'll say that he's allowing and bringing back the humanity, I think, in Black people. There's a redemptive quality to that that's just not there with the culture vultures. The culture vultures are they don't really have any interest in the soul, I don't think. Yeah. And I would argue that Kendrick, guys like Common, to a less used to be, I would say this about Kanye, but there's a whole thing with him right now too. And he's having a bit of a moment, but like there are these different there's different artists in hip hop that are actually trying to elevate the conversation and people towards humanity, and they don't get near the radio play until guys like Ye, until guys like Chance the Rapper, until guys like Kendrick. And so I'm hopeful. I'm excited that he's doing and making the waves that he's making, because it to me it speaks to like I think the step one is like, okay, let's grab our humanity back. Then step two, let's bring it to God to redeem it. And that's what I'm really excited to see as far as like the progression. You know what I mean? That makes
Yeah, I think you and I talked about this beforehand, but and we've talked about this before, is, I think that to an extent, Black people are a victim of their own culture. They're certainly not the only people in the world that are victims of their own culture, but I think they're one of them. But part of that also is the way that they've been exploited by the forces that have commercialized and taken their culture from them, right? So you had people like Kendrick, or you had people like Nas back in the day, right? There was an underground subculture that was trying to tell the story of Black people, where they're trying to relate their stories to each other. And then you had the music industry come in and essentially become parasitic upon it. And you have the birth of gangster rap, which starts promoting these kind of values back. It's like receiving these values and sending them back amplified massively for major commercial appeal. And so on top of that, that's where you start getting into the Diddy industrial complex, as you said, and you get Drake, and Drake is that culture vulture who's like selling back the worst parts of this culture that ends up feeding into Black people in general. And so what's powerful about listening to this discussion between Drake and Kendrick, now I'm familiar with some of Kendrick's stuff from a number of years ago, like before I left San Francisco, essentially, but I didn't follow him. But of course, I knew who Drake was because I can't stand him. So, because it's the sort of music it's play. I was in my local gym that I worked out at. It was just a family-owned spot. Drake would be on, and I was like, okay, how do I get around this? Like, do I wear headphones where I work out, something like that? So I know who he is. But to listen to that dialogue between, here's this major label, big time corporate, and I don't mean that in a good sense, corporate rapper who's Drake, and then you have a storyteller. You have someone trying to articulate, and Kendrick really did come from the hood, my understanding, right? So he's relating an experience of a broken culture, a man who made it out of a broken culture, and as a storyteller, and they're going at each other back and forth at the highest levels of culture, like millions of streams, millions and millions and millions of streams listening to this, in a form of, there's a poetic component to it, but there's also like a meeting of ideas and accusations. And it got personal and ugly. And I think that's the part that was really striking for me. Like, it wasn't just, trying to give the best put down like Eminem and 8 Mile. It was like, no, I'm going to talk about your family, and I'm going to talk about like make criminal charges against you. And I thought that was really significant because, again, as you said, you had this whole mass of people rising up to push back on a culture that's been imposed to some extent on them. And I thought that was, to hear that, I thought was really interesting, and to hear it done artistically and done well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They not like us. The last line that everybody goes crazy about is you're not a colleague, you're a colonizer. And in that last verse, Kendrick is really trying to paint the picture that Drake basically hops around from whoever is like most popular as far as selling that stuff, and he kind of like bites off of their style in order to get more sales, basically. And Kendrick points that out, and that's the last line that he says, like, you're not a colleague, you're a colonizer. And there's, like I said, man, like, it's funny that we're like doing this thing about like a rap beef, but I don't know that people really caught the significance of it. Like, it's not nothing. And to me, it's a sign of the times, man. Like, it all started with Cat Williams back on Shannon Sharp talking about everybody in the industry. And then that was like January of this year. And so that
was January of this year.
Did you know that? January?
No, I would have thought it was a couple years ago.
It was January of this year. He went, oh my goodness. Cat Williams went on Shannon Sharp and was basically like, all lies are being exposed in 2024. It don't matter who you is. It don't matter if you Diddy or Jay-Z or whoever you is. All lies are being exposed. And, the conspiracy theories, like, did you already know what was going on?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I didn't bring my tinfoil, but like you could just kind of start to put some tinfoil on you. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
we've done that before.
there's something that conversation happened in January, and as far as like Black culture is concerned, like there's been no shortage of like lies, secrets, crazy stuff being exposed to show the stark contrast between the pimps and the culture. And
Right.
it's a great time to be alive and to witness that because it's happening everywhere. It's happening in the media, it's happening in hip hop, it's happening in politics. We're gonna get into all that, but
Yeah.
it's you can't not see it at this point. You know what I mean?
Yep. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation, not just like this isn't meant to be a conversation just about Kendrick and Drake. It's that it's part of a larger puzzle that fits into Diddy and Jay-Z, especially the Diddy parties, right? And then that feeds into like Kamala Harris being sold to the Black community. And so there's a real thing happening specific to the Black community, it seems to me, just like that's happening in so many other communities. Like, no, we're rejecting this identity that's being forced on us, this hyper commercialized, exploitative, parasitic, colonizing identity that's being forced on us, and trying to figure out who we are. And that's something that you and I have talked about is the question that lives inside many Black people. Like, well, who are we? We're brought over, we considering the break in history that starts, in the 1600s, et cetera. Like, what does that mean for a person trying to establish his identity, right? Being brought over to, we don't need to get into the woke social justice aspects of it. But if you try to figure out who you are and your lineage is, and your lineage only goes back 400 years and not by your own choice, right? Forced immigration, let's say. So when you try to root your identity somewhere, where do you root it in? When you're property of someone else. And so as you run that forward 400 years and you have these massive corporate, arms that are pushing incredible amounts of propaganda, very profitable propaganda, and having to shake that off in the middle of the most contentious election, hopefully in American history, forwards and backwards, it's quite a moment.
It is. No, it really is, man. That's something that I've thought a lot about too. Is there's a you're watching in real time of people trying to create something, and there's a lot of interest. Frankly, there's a lot of interest in Black folks not being sovereign, not being people that have a real, genuine identity. You know what I'm saying? And I'm again not woke social justice angle at all. Like that, if any of you guys know me that are watching, you know that that's not my ministry. It's woke social justice stuff, but there's a very real disconnect that, and we're trying to make and create something that's genuinely ours. And so in some ways, like rap and hip hop were kind of like a part of that. There was a real, jazz, right? Even before then, we've talked about jazz before, but like there are these moments where there's been a creation that we've made or that we've pioneered, and then someone is like, wow, that actually has, we were talking about this offline, that has so much feel and vibe and earthiness to it. This music and the way that you guys move. Let's hijack that, put a bunch of propo in it, because that's gonna move the people, right? That's gonna get people going, because and then you talk about this offline, a lot of our music is very much like there's a earthy vibe to it. It's very human, you know what I mean? In a way that is uniquely our own. And the cool part about that is that you can kind of connect with people really easily because we're all humans. The challenge with that is that it's all feels, right? And if it's all feels, sometimes you don't have to have reels. You could just push out feels, push out vibes, right? And put whatever you want into it. But if it feels good, right? If it's got a good beat to it, if it's got a good sound, then the messaging, who cares about the messaging, right? And that's what I think. If I'm looking at it objectively, I'm not saying that we were sinless by any means, but what I'm saying is that there are people and forces that saw what we have and are using it to not just our, demise, but I think the demise of a lot of people, to be frank. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, and you left me a voice note about the feels thing, and I think that was I was thinking about that, and I root a lot of this back to the 1960s, and I think it first came in when there was this wholesale rejection of so we'll say Western rationalism in favor of the feels of Eastern mysticism,
Mhm.
right? And so to some extent, the 1960s music, rock and roll, was a it was like there was rock and roll was invented as part of black culture, blues.
Yeah,
Then, you had Elvis take over some of that, and then it got exported to the
yeah,
United Kingdom and came back to the United States, amplified massively.
yeah,
Right. And so you had this echoing, and I think we also talked about how that's also what happened in dance music, that a lot of the early DJ music was invented by black people in upper middle or middle class black people in Chicago and in Detroit. That
yeah.
also got exported to the UK in the 80s, and then came back massively amplified. Now, but the process started right, right. But because of the feels, right, the vibes. But the process started with the rejection of the father in Western culture, with the adoption of Eastern mysticism. This is why I hate the Beatles, because the Beatles were the tip of the spear for that. It's a very particular mystical form of feels, of vibes. And
Yeah.
then you bring in under that, you bring in what, R&B, right, in the 70s, funk and soul,
Yeah.
right? And so you get to this point where the music it's non-rational. And so you have a lot of guys who are like, I like to listen to classical or psalms, and all that stuff is incredible, and it's so completely outside of where American culture is at right now,
Yeah.
because it's so vibes centric.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with vibes, nothing wrong at all. But there's a point where I think earthy becomes worldly
Correct.
really, really quickly.
Hey, oh, listen.
Yeah.
You can get, I mean, vibes, feels, sauce. You can get lost in Sauceville
Yeah.
immediately.
Yes.
Immediately. And I'm guilty of it. And I think
Sure.
because there comes a point, there comes a point in the night, at the cookout, right, where it's like, okay, we should probably stop drinking and go home. But
Sure.
it's a point in the night where it's like, man, this is a good time.
Yeah.
Let's cut it up. You end up
Of course.
staying too long, and you drink too much, and it just becomes a worse night than what it really had to be. So yeah, I mean, vibes have an exponential acceleration that
Mhm.
rationality, I would say, it takes a while to like kind of build it and build on it. You catch a wave, you cut on some Marvin Gaye,
Mhm.
okay? The rest of your day is downhill, okay? You
Yeah.
you cut on some Marvin Gaye, some Isaac Hayes. It's not a lot getting done that day. You're gonna go on that back porch, light you up a black and mild with the wood tip, and enjoy your day. That's what you're going to do.
We may have done that once or twice.
We did, and
That's
you
right, we
had
did.
time.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, this is also, it also goes back to jazz. And when you listen to when you read Jack Kerouac on the road, that's what he's talking about. Like, Jack Kerouac was a super conservative guy. He was in the military. I think he was a Marine or in the Navy, something like that. And his politics were actually conservative. But in the 1950s, he left that world and got into this like sort of drug fueled underworld. And on the road is his cross country and back kind of adventure, seeking kicks. And kicks at the time were jazz bars and marijuana and heroin and stuff like that. And there's actually a passage in the book where he's talking about he's seeking what black people have, right? And so that's the beginning of that process, where it's like there was this underground, we'll call it a subculture, like maybe that's not quite the best term for it, but you have this maybe an underworld almost a little bit that got tapped into and then just exploded out into American culture. And like, okay, I can understand that there's a way in which, yeah, we're on the back porch listening to music among friends and family, and we're being responsible. But when you have the epidemic of fatherlessness,
Man.
where there isn't that structure, people fall into that world, and maybe they never crawl out, black or white, doesn't matter. You fall into these worlds where you have chosen family, right, where the values in that chosen family aren't so good, some
Mm.
people never make it out of there. And this is very, very old.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're dead on. I mean, you talked about this, but there's you what a father ought to do if he's going to be a good father is to say, hey, this is a good time, right? This is what we do when we're having a good time. But at
Mhm.
the end of the day, right, this is about you're as a especially when I'm raising boys, so I'm talking
Yeah.
to I'm talking as though I'm talking to my sons. There's a time and a place, right, to have a good time and to go get work done and be responsible and to do the right thing. And as you said, the challenge is that if you don't have a father, a mother can do it, but there comes a point, time in a boy's life where, he's not really trying to listen to mom. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And he's not really trying to listen to dad either, but he better listen to dad because dad
Right.
is, you know what I mean? Dad is able to personify like force in a way that
Hmm.
just isn't. And so, yeah, like I think the thing that helped me was the fact that my father was around. Because I,
Yeah.
I was telling somebody the other day, I was like, bro, if it was just left up to me and vibes and my mom, I don't know where I'd be.
Yeah.
I probably couldn't keep a job. I mean, it would just not be a good situation. And so it's weird to say this, but like vibes are very much an emotional state. It's very much a gut, instinctual, primal state. It's hindbrain activity.
Hmm.
And you have to have somebody to come in and say, all right, cut the hindbrain off, get the prefrontal cortex cortexing, okay, and let's get to work.
That's
Let's
right.
get some things done. And the challenging part is that once you flip that switch to that hindbrain's addictive, man. That
Yep.
prefrontal cortex is a lot of work. And so if
Hmm.
you can tap into that hindbrain in mass, right, as a political figure or a media figure, bro, you rule the world because
Hmm.
that's human. You're tapping into human instinct and primology. You're tapping into something that is innate before we could speak, real language. And
Hmm.
that's a very, very, very challenging thing to cut the off switch on. Somebody has to decide to cut that off. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. I mean, you have to decide to cut that off and you have to stay with it
Mhm.
because the temptation, I think we live in a very hindbrain centric kind of culture,
Yeah,
right?
man.
I think the Bitcoin guys would call it, was it low time preference?
Yeah.
Like living for the moment, right?
That's
However you choose to express that. And
mhm.
so, and that's been, I think, forced on people slowly over multiple generations,
Mhm.
probably for 50, 60 more, something like that years. And so now it's very easy to live, especially with social media, and probably even more so since COVID,
Yep.
since that apocalypse, everyone's living just for the moment. But
Mhm.
to click out of that and, just fair is fair. I think that there's a component within Protestant Christianity that's been like that too. I
Mhm.
think that's the whole, like maybe some of the whole dispensational thing is like, if you're worried that Jesus is going to come back any minute, you're going to be in this perhaps reactive state. I don't understand it fully, so I'm just gonna try some things on. But I
Mhm.
think there's a component of like, we're not going to think about long-term planning for the future because it could end at any minute. And
That's
that same apocalyptic thinking, of course, showed up around 2012 with a lot of new age people. It showed up around Y2K.
mhm.
And this, where you're living where the world could end, literally end at any moment.
Yeah.
You're going to be in a hindbrain state. And,
That's
and but I think that's where the apocalyptic thinking, where it has its appeal, because it gives people an excuse to
yeah.
remain in this hindbrain state versus, no, there is going to be a sun. The sun is going to come up tomorrow. There is going to be a tomorrow. I have to start planning and thinking for it, which feeds back to this moment in terms of how I spend my time.
Yeah.
And that is the world of the Father. And I
Mhm.
think there is enormous resistance in our culture towards that idea. And I
Yeah.
think that's what's behind Donald Trump. The
Mhm.
hatred for him is
Mhm.
like, he's the man he is. And of course, he's a flawed man, sure.
Of
But the
course.
resistance is people feel that a multi billionaire patriarch, father with 17 grandkids or something like that,
Mhm.
who's built a business and is in his 80s and he represents this way of building and planning for the long term, versus like, well, but here's Kamala and she offers vibes, right? It's the split, I think, is that fundamental.
I think so too. I think, now I will say this, Trump is a unique character because I would say up until this point, the conservative movement and the presidents that they put forth have only been father, analytical, long-term, facts and logic, right? Generally,
more or less.
Yeah, I would say. Well, I'll put it in my era, right? My era, we had Bush, John McCain. See where I'm going with this? Bush, John McCain. Okay, you could say Bush was maybe like kind of cool, but bro, Donnie T, Donald Trump, he comes in. Not only is he bringing, hey, law and order, boom, 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 this is what we're doing, but he's kind of got this New York mob boss thing going on. Hey, look, forget about it. You know what I mean? He's coming in and he's bringing vibes. And so I think that that's why he's able to make the inroads that he has, because I don't know if anybody's looked at it that's watching this right now. Trump is doing well with Black men, particularly. Like go ahead.
No, I talk about that. Please dive into that.
He's doing like there's polls on this. You can go check them out. I'm not citing anything. I'm the source. But
source, I am source.
But there definitely is. At least in July there was. His approval ratings with Black men in particular were good. But I'm telling you anecdotally, when I go to the barbershop, these are the conversations that guys are having. It's like, hey man, look, I know that we're not supposed to, but like, I got to get my money right. You know what I mean? And we're in the middle of wartime. I don't know if she's it. And so that's a conversation that a lot of people, maybe not in mainstream, right, or haven't, obviously not in mainstream. We all know why that is. But on the ground, right, and granted, I live in Tennessee. There's probably a bent there to it. But as I'm talking to people that look like me as I'm at the barbershop, that's a conversation that Black men are definitely having. It's like, look, man, we need to get the money right, and we need to make sure that we're in a good position in wartime. So it is what it is. You can call me whatever you want to call me. I'm going Donnie, Big Donnie. And that's what a lot of dudes are talking about. And so I think that's one thing that I would say is like, yeah, he represents this father and law and order angle, but he's got a persona that's not squared up or like nerdy. He's got this, I don't even know what you call it, but like, here's the bottom line is people loved Donald Trump in like Black community prior to him running as a Republican. Like, they loved him because he kind of has this gangster mob boss kind of persona, big guy, he's Donnie. You're fired, that whole thing. And so he's scaring them, and he's scaring the left. And I think that's why the left is like, look, man, we got to throw a Hail Mary. We need a Black woman immediately. That's the best we got. Because Joe Biden can't do anything. He's going to lose. Best we got is a Black woman. And so that's what they're hoping, I think, to win. But I just don't know. I don't know if that's good enough, unless they cheat. But who knows?
Well, when they cheat. So I guess the question that I would have then, so you're in the barbershop and you have some guys, and I think this is absolutely the most compelling reason to vote for Trump, is only one of these two candidates cares at all about the economy, cares at all about making sure that we have a future, right? The other wants to abort the future, essentially. So in that conversation where men are saying like, I'm going to vote for Donnie because, I got to get the money right, like you said, is there pushback? Or like, what kind of pushback comes from that? What kind of response can you possibly have to that? Like, Donald Trump is a racist? Like, what sort of things do people say in support of Kamala, or is there actual support of Kamala, or is it just rejection of Trump?
I think and again, I can only speak to Black men because I'm not, I'm not going in a lot of like Black female spaces.
Yeah. Well, we know that you are right now speaking for all Black people for all time. So
of all time. Yeah. I'm the guy. No, from what I'm, there's no pushback. Everybody at
Okay.
the shop is like, man, like kind of right. You know what I mean? Like nobody's willing, nobody's
Sure.
willing to like give it a hearty amen, but they're like, look, man, I mean, gas is up, groceries is up, my money is not going as far as it used to. I got to figure something out. And
Hmm.
we got to get our literally a conversation that was had is, look, man, listen, they can call me anything they want to, but I got to get my boy back in there. The guy said, he said, Donnie's going to make America super great again. And it was just like everybody was just kind of like looking around, and you look at the men, and you look at the women looking at the men, and you look at the men just kind of keep cutting, keep doing what they're doing. But when it's no ladies around, I'm telling you, man, everybody I've talked to is on the same page. Same page.
When there's no ladies around, so what's going on? What's going on with black women? Because
Well,
we've talked about this. Like we've talked about the problem with feminism in the black community, that what gets projected outwards is a very patriarchal culture, but what's actually going on behind the scenes is you have that if mama ain't happy, nobody happy kind of culture. It's kind of a matriarchy in a way.
oh yeah. I
Yeah.
think there's and that's if I'm DNC, I'm thinking strategy. Yeah, like let's throw the lady that looks black. Let's throw her in there, and maybe the black women of that culture will keep the men in line. Is the hope, but
Wow.
right. But here's the reality, right? No finance, no romance. So on some level, the men know that, like, look, all of that stuff that we're talking about, we need to go this, we need to vote for her, blah, blah, blah. All of that, cool. We can talk about that. But let's get down to the brass tacks. If I'm not making sure that I'm taking care of my wife and my kids, there's going to be hell to pay the captain.
Hmm.
Right? So I'm going to have to figure something out to make sure that our bag is secure in the family. And that's not going to be with, you know, Kamala. It's just
Right.
not going to be with her. So I think again, it's very hush hush. It's everybody's kind of dapping each other up on the low because we all understand what's really going on. But ladies say, "Yeah, we gonna vote for Kamala." We're like, "Yeah, girl, do your thing. Shout out to you. Love that for you. That's a good. Sounds like a good idea." But all of
Hmm.
us are like, "Look, man, I'm trying to get that gas where it was.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? I'm trying to get the food where it was." Now, here's the thing: can Trump do all of that? He could probably make some opportunities happen, right? Kind of deregulate some of the oil and that kind of stuff. But I don't know if the Fed will. I don't know how cooperative the Fed is going to be with Donnie. So I mean, but the bottom line is that people associate good times with a certain president. So the reality is like everybody's thinking he's probably going to be the guy to fix it, or at least look like he's fixing it. And he's got the vibe. He's got the mafia thing going on. So
Hmm.
I think he presents a really big problem for the DNC. I mean, it's showing.
I think, well, insofar as any political candidate or president can fix anything, um, I think that really it's a choice between how many people are invested in actually ending Western civilization versus how many people they kind of like being rich, right? Because a Kamala Harris presidency, it all comes down.
Yeah.
There is no America left. They're basically saying that we're going to end freedom. Like John Kerry said that we're going to end freedom of speech and the First Amendment. We're going to pack the Supreme Court. We're going to legalize all of these immigrants. Abortion. Out the window. Like not out the window, but like coming in the window, I suppose. So I think that there have to be some very smart men, very wealthy men that are looking at that and be like, you know what? We've kind of got it good right now. Like,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
so why would we throw our support behind the end when there's still a lot of money to be made? Now, I'm not saying that like greed is any sort of aspirational perspective. But I can't see the people who really control things being so ideologically committed to bringing it all down. This is my argument against World War III. This is why I don't think we're going to see nuclear. I could be wrong. I don't have a crystal ball, but this is why I don't think we're going to see nuclear war. Just because there have been forces at work that have built up a global civilization that's doing quite well. And when you do nuclear war, that all comes down and it doesn't come back.
Really?
Right? I mean, it's not easy. So I don't see people. I don't see people truly being committed to that. But maybe there's something else that they're afraid of, and maybe the Diddy party stuff plays into this. Like if it's a survival question, if Trump becomes president and all the beans get spilled, is beans getting spilled and me going to jail, is that preferable to me just being like, okay, let's just push the button, like I'm taking my ball and going home? And I think on some level that might actually be what's going on.
Well, so that I understand your point, Kamala almost represents us keeping the beans in the jar, or not us, but them keeping beans in the jar. Is that right? Okay.
Yes, and wrecking everything else to keep the beans in the jar.
I think you're right on that. I think that Diddy knew a lot and knows a lot as far as who went to the parties, and I mean that's the name of the game. I mean, I don't know if you saw, there was there's been a ton of media in the past like 48 hours about what's going on, but there was a lady that came forth. There's a tape that's going around with the A-list celebrity. There's 3,000, I think 3,224 phone calls to a lawyer in Texas of people that said that they were dealt with at these parties. Out of those, only 124 have been substantiated with hard evidence, but that doesn't mean those things didn't happen, and just that something tragic may have happened and they didn't have any evidence for it. And so when you think about the breadth of that, it's like, okay, and we know, another thing that we know is that like those things were being filmed so that it was blackmail, right? So there's this game that goes on, or is going on in Hollywood, in media, that let's all have a crazy time and film each other doing it so nobody talks about what's what. And bro, like that case coming forward at the time that it did, man, I mean, it's almost like it's like the point in the Wizard of Oz, you know. You're looking at the big face and you think he's like this powerful like wizard, and then you go behind and it's just a dude, you know what I mean, with his pants down. And that's really what this situation is like everybody can see that the people that are making moves at the top are using their positions of power for leverage against each other. Much less, or much more us. You know what I'm saying? And so I think you're dead on. I mean, I think if Trump gets in there and does what he wants to do, I think all bets are off, because he wasn't, as far as I know, he wasn't involved, right, in those circles, but he was connected to know what was going on in those circles. So, I mean, if he can do what he needs to do, there's going to be a lot of people dealt with, and I think that scares them.
This is so interesting because it's taking you back to January of 2021, and you and I had just met. We had been in Chattistan. Shout out Chattistan. And I don't know if you'd appeared on my podcast for the first time, but we definitely knew each other. And I remember having some of these similar thoughts as we were going into like January 6th and the inauguration. Like, okay, clearly this election was not cool. This is not good. In fact, I voted in Arizona, and I voted with a Sharpie. And so there was a whole big thing, like, you're not supposed to vote with Sharpie pens because it bled through the paper, and mine actually did bleed through. I'm like, this is strange. Why am I voting with a Sharpie? Because it was bleeding through the paper. So it gives a bad result. And
Yeah.
so then all the fraud and the big spike and all this different stuff. And I was like, this is not going to stand at all. And I was convinced that like sometime in January, like Trump was just going to dump it all. And like, I was prepared to like bug into my apartment, not bug out, bug into my apartment for like a month. I had like emergency food and all this different stuff. I was prepared to not leave my house, for like 30, 60 days, something like that. I had water and everything because it seemed to me the only way to avoid the catastrophe of a Biden presidency. And then the moment came and it passed and nothing happened. And so I was thinking about that at the time. Like there was definitely a moment right around like January 6th and all that, like that weekend. I'm like, well, if it's going to happen, it's probably going to happen now. This is wild. And then it felt like, I don't know, something got missed or who knows, maybe it was a setup. We'll never know what actually took place there. But I remember that there was a definite moment in time where it felt like something could have happened, was going to happen, and then should have happened and didn't happen. And then we ended up in the Biden presidency. Now that's just me. That's just my feelings. My feelings are not authoritative, but that was what I definitely felt because we were coming off of the insane year that was 2020. And so anything seemed possible at the time. And then it didn't happen. And now here we are 4.5 years later, something like that.
Yeah.
And so the way that I summed that up to myself is like, because at the time everyone was calling Donald Trump the God Emperor, right? That was the meme, right? And I was like, everyone wants to be the God Emperor until it comes time to do God Emperor stuff, right? Everyone wants to say like, we're going to clean up, we're going to drain the swamp until it comes like to push the button and dump all the sewage, and just let humanity sort that out. And so I would love to believe that all of this stuff would come to light. And if I'm being maximum generous, I pray that there's somebody other than God, of course, who's sovereign over all things, who's like, you know what? We can't let people see what these folks are doing. Like we really can't, because I mean, we can't imagine the chaos that would result if we really saw what was happening at Diddy parties. If you really saw this person whose TV show you watch, whose album you buy, whose movies that are your favorites of all time, or whose books, if you were to really see that, like what would be left? And so sometimes I get a little skeptical that the stuff is really going to come out, if only for the benefit of humanity, because we can't bear to have our illusions crushed, because not all illusions are bad, right? Like when you go to a restaurant, the front of the restaurant's very nice, low candles, music and all that. But if you were to go into the kitchen, you would have your right. You'd have your illusions crushed. So it's not necessarily that illusions are bad. In this case, they kind of are, but you kind of have to preserve that. So I really I don't know. I could go either way with it, frankly. I mean, I quite like civilization. So I guess I don't know how real the threat is, or whether there's something pushing the Diddy stuff out. I don't know what to make of all of this.
Well, I think this is interesting that you bring this up, because I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and we were talking about how many guys are there? How many guys are on the team? How many guys are using this system in order to have leverage against each other? Because it was Jeffrey Epstein,
right?
Now it's Diddy. In the next 4 years, who's it going to be? Is it going to be, who's it going to be next time? And so
sports are coming down. Pro football, pro sports,
right? And so it's like there seems to be like an endless amount of these games going on.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like the illusion is that, oh no, it's only like a few bad actors and we're going to get them because we're the good guys and we always get the bad guys, kind of thing. And I think your point is right. Like I think illusions do make civilization, and to that extent, right? What happens to Black culture when its illusions are broken of who they thought were heroes, right? Yeah. What happens to that civilization? Well, usually how it goes is that you have civilization in decline, then it goes to tribalism, and then you have warring factions, and then you have some supreme leader come in and establish law and order.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that happens on micro levels with, I'm sure, will be Black culture, and then it'll happen, I would imagine, in American culture. I mean, you had this conversation before that I feel like Black people get the tests, the social tests, right? Like let's
Yeah.
right. You remember that we said let's try out feminism here and see what. Ooh, it worked.
It's true. That's we've talked about the Moynihan report before, right? Like we've talked about that the Moynihan report, I think the Black family was beginning to struggle in the mid 20th century. And so I don't know if it's probably not Daniel Patrick Moynihan. I think it was someone else with the same last name, put out a report that said the way that we save the Black family or the black culture is by bringing back Black fathers back into the home. And the feminists of the mid 60s and 70s were like, we can't let men have a win. So they squashed the Moynihan report, and the Black family fell apart because feminists were going to take out their agenda on Black culture first. That's in I've got Libido Dominandi by E. Michael Jones. You can't see it. He's over my right shoulder, but he talks about that in the book. And this is well documented. So I think you're probably right that there is a lot of social engineering and experimentation that's done on the Black community first before exporting it. Like what was gangster rap, right?
Yeah.
Let's get this honed in. And then gangster rap culture essentially became American culture.
It did. Yeah. And give it to masses and see what happens. And now it was funny. I live in the suburbs. And I was walking my dogs, my two Yorkies, suburban, right? Suburban as hell, man.
Very, very Black culture, Yorkies.
I'm down with the people. No, but I was walking them, and man, it was two boys, white boys, and they were riding in their golf cart listening to trap. And I had to look back and laugh, and I said, they think that this is cool. Right? This is vibes for them. You know what I'm saying? And, for us, like, it's not advantageous for us to go down that road too deep, you got two white boys that's driving around in a golf cart in the suburbs. It's like, at the end of the day, like, dad is not going to play that, right? Go get your homework done, get your lesson, whatever. When you have a fatherless home situation, right? And, you run the risk of that indoctrinating you towards a certain way of life that you take very seriously. I know kids, Black kids that I grew up with, that I went to school with, that grew up in the same kind of household that I did, that want to be ghetto. They want to be ghetto. They want to act like they don't have anything. They want to act like they actually are gangsters or whatever the case is. And it's like, bro, both your one parent drive a Mercedes, the other one drive an Escalade. You went to private school.
That's right.
You're not hard. You're a square, just like me. It's okay. You know what I'm saying? It's okay. But when you export it and you make it cool, right? And you factor that as far as like brothers go, right? Brothers always want to make sure girls are checking for them, right? So if it's attractive to be a little street dude, then I'm gonna be a little street dude, right? I'm gonna have my hat a certain way. I'm gonna have my clothes a certain way, whatever the case is. And so I think I think the difference in it getting into like mainstream, more or less like white society, is that there at least is a sounding board in the background to course correct in some way. Maybe not necessarily to the extent that is either fully rational or God honoring for that matter. But like at the end of the day, you're not gonna have Stan, right, that went to NYU for accounting. He's not gonna end up like leaving, right? He's not gonna end up leaving and going and being a dope boy. He's just not going to Atlanta to be a dope boy. He's going to end up at Ernst & Young, and that's okay. Good. When you do that, but we don't have that same backdrop. Many of us don't. I do, because again, I'm in a subculture. I'm in a Black upper middle class subculture. It's different, right? My parents weren't playing that, but I've got cousins whose situation is a lot different than mine, and so when they hear that music, right? And they respond accordingly, and they get the signals from girls that that's something that girls are interested in. They're going to adopt that mindset, and they're going to adopt that way of moving in the world, because that's, I mean, frankly, if you really want to get into it, that's how powerful the attraction and the draw is between a man and a woman. It causes want to change his whole identity, you know what I'm saying, to become something that she might be interested in. And so, you know, that's a whole conversation, is the allure of women being the in some ways the guiding force for a man developing himself in whatever way he sees will get the job done. That's a conversation we could get into there, but
well, I guess the get the job done in this sense is framed in terms of the job to get done is getting laid.
Yeah.
Right. Because getting the job done is not getting married and having kids and building multi-generational prosperity. The getting the job done is, again, I think it's low time preference. Like, well, what's going to be satisfying to me right now? Yeah. And so I'll adopt whatever persona that I need in order to accomplish this very short-term goal. And that's not the stable, grounded, confident, provider. That's the thug, right? That's the motorcycle guy or whatever it is, right? Yeah. But I think the problem is that those attitudes get adopted, and then especially if it's in like your late teens or early 20s, it becomes who you are. Yeah. Right. When your identity as a man is being formed and you're being set on the trajectory of your life, if you adopt, especially if you go to, a university and you adopt a posture of low time preference, like I'm just going to get laid and become a guy that gets laid very easily, and you set your 20s off on that trajectory, and then your music and everything you do feeds into that. Yeah, of course, you're going to have a hard time unplugging that when you get 25, 30, like as we talked about, when is the hindbrain going to switch off and be like, oh, wow, I got to start thinking about what I'm going to do 5 years from now, right? Yeah. I'm still working at AutoZone or whatever.
It's hard to switch the hindbrain off. And that's why I think it's a really important thing. It's a really important thing to understand and embrace your human nature. That's kind of what I was talking about in that voice note I sent you, that I think that whether it's in particularly like in Christian circles, I think that there's not enough conversation about the redemptive quality of being human, right? Being a man that has a kind of like, not necessarily bravado, but like just an earthy kind of confidence. Like, I know who I am, I know what I'm about, right? There's a redeeming quality about that. Where it gets to be too much is swaggering, right? That it gets to be too much when there's a lot of peacocking and posturing and showboating and that kind of thing. But there is a redemptive quality to that. And I think that the biggest challenge that I think, oh man, and we weren't even going to go this direction.
We're there now. Let's go.
Yeah. The biggest challenge that I think in the church in particular is that for a while there was an emphasis on spiritual and cerebral, as opposed to like a grounded, earthy way of being in the world.
I agree.
And as a result, you have now, we weren't going to go here. Sorry. But as a result, now you've got guys that are beating the war drum, and Nazis are coming out.
Yeah.
Right? We brought out the Nazis.
Let's go.
Because we need power. And that's a primal urge, and it's a God-given urge. Because, I mean, that's, what more is Genesis, 1, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. That's a power statement, right? That's hey, you put your foot on the neck of the wilderness and you create something out of it. That's your birthright as a man, and it's common grace to do that. The challenge, not the challenging part, but the part that comes, I would say, with maturity is having brought in that birthright, taking that to heart. Okay, I'm a man, I'm a woman. This is what we're called to do as men and women. And then adding, right, New Testament to it, special revelatory grace to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? That's something that has to be added to it so that the power doesn't become something that you get sick off of. That's
Mm-hmm.
what you see with guys like Diddy. That's what you see with people that are in politics, is that there's no one guiding the ship toward their path to power. There's no end to their power. The power of just taking care of your family is not enough. You have to ruin people's lives. You have to do debaucherous shit just to stay on top. Like that, that is where vibes becomes very, very dangerous on right, left, and center. It doesn't matter. Like when you become power hungry, where it's not enough for you just to win for your people, but you must frankly destroy everybody else and win everything all the time. You want to ascend and be God. That's when it becomes a situation where you're filming people doing debaucherous stuff at your house at
Mm-hmm.
a freak off. That's when it becomes a situation where it's like, it doesn't really matter what's best for Black people. It matters that I get reelected in 4 years. It matters that I get reelected in 2 years.
That's right.
That's the path to power without God. If you don't have God on your path to power as a man, you may not end up like Diddy, but you're not going to end up in a good spot. I'm going to tell you that right now. I've seen a lot. I've been in the men's space a very long time. I'm a man myself, and I've met a lot of guys and talked to a lot of guys. You have too. I'm telling you, if you don't have God and you're on that path to power to become a man of consequence in the world, you're in a dangerous spot because Saltville is slippery. It is a slippery slope, man. I'm telling you. You.
This is interesting because I'm thinking about vibes now, because there are clearly people in culture who are very good at selling vibes, right? And I think that there's a magic to it, and I don't mean magic in a neutral sense. I mean magic like in a spiritual mysticism sense. Like I think that there is a spellcraft is probably a better word for it. So I think that that's part of it. And there are some people that have mastered that spellcraft of vibes, and it's hypnotic. And I think it may be true that there may just be people that are just good at vibing, right? And they become part of these industries that then takes that unique gift and then twists it and manipulates it and amplifies it. And so suddenly this gift that was given by God gets twisted for this dark end. And I think that's the entire music industry, is that you have, young men and women who are genuinely blessed by God with musical gifts. They get harvested into the industry. Their soul gets taken from them, and then demons inhabit their body after the end of many rituals, and their gift gets twisted for darkness. And I think that that's a lot of what's going on. And that also hooks into us, because I think you're right that there is a way in which the West, and I can't say if it's a new thing, but here's where I think a lot of the energy of the whole Nazi Crusader thing is coming from, is it's a version, not the version, not the only version, but it's a version of vibes for white people, right? Right. Like, what do white person vibes look like? Like, I know there's the website stuffwhitepeoplelike.com, and that's,
I haven't seen that.
You've never seen that site?
I haven't seen that. You gotta send that to me, man.
You're gonna fall over laughing. But I mean, like, there's truth to it, right? But like, so aside from that, or aside from golf or whatever, what does white people vibes look like? And like, well, we can say for sure that we'll all lean into the conquest, colonizer, crusader kind of thing. But I think I can't say for sure, but I think there's something good in there. But it's just that's been driven into a bad place. So maybe part of the question is, we can say what vibes look like for Indian people, right? Whether in India or Native American, for Black people, right? But what do vibes look like for white people, for Europeans? I don't know that we know anymore. And in fact, I would say that this is very interesting, because it almost is like the inverse of stuff that we've been talking about for a long time. Because if a Black man today is looking for some identity, at least he can go back to African music and and harvest some of the African music and establish the sound of an identity.
That's
But
right.
like, what's a white guy going to do? Like, oh, my ancestors were German. Let's get that accordion. so so I don't know. So I guess maybe this is part of this is white people themselves. This is kind of backwards from everything we've ever talked about. But maybe it's like, because we've talked about how black people don't really have an identity, and I think that's true. But maybe there's also a component of like white people not having an identity. And so they accept the identity that's sold to them, even if it isn't native to them. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Yeah.
I'm speculating a whole bunch of stuff, so I don't know.
No, I mean, I think this is well, and it comes down to what your guy, what's it? Who Libido Dominandi? Who wrote that?
Oh, Michael Jones.
Where he's like, we shouldn't talk about race, we should talk about ethnicity, because that's actually more true to the person. So
Yeah.
So with the term like white, black, that doesn't leave any room really for ethnicity, because white is like, it's like Irish people, it's like German people, it's like
Right.
people, right? So there's a variant then with black people. There's people that are Igbo, which are, you know, Nigerian heritage. Now I will say most blacks in America came from Nigeria. That's a whole conversation. But the point is like, when you have like these monolithic terms and you don't have their subsequent and respective ethnicities and cultures associated with those ethnicities, you get homogeny, which is why I think in some ways like rap and pop music actually kind of sound the same today. They're both more or less assigned cultural ways of being in the world. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's funny because I never really thought about, you know, what are white guy vibes. But the better question is, what are German guy vibes? What are Polish guy vibes? You know what I mean? Like, what does it look like? But seriously, it's like, what does it look like to be and appreciate my cultural heritage outside of whatever mainstream has given to me as my cultural heritage, right? I think, especially right now, I think a lot of what is talked about when it comes to white guys is, you know, colonizer or whatever the case is. And there is an element to that that's good, in the same way that there's an element to, you know, a brother playing his saxophone, right? There's an element of that that's God given, and that's what I think is more or less, like, I think it's weird to say this, but like our purpose, maybe. Like, I think that God maybe assigns gifts and ways of moving in the world as kind of like, that's your job, right? In the same way that you had the 12 tribes of Israel, each tribe had its own job, right? Each bloodline and family had its own job. You had the priest class, you had the political class, you had the music class, and they all weren't the same tribe. And so I think the real sweet spot, especially to you and I's conversation, is how do we appreciate the other guy, right, in a way that doesn't make him milquetoast as though he doesn't have a culture, right? But that also maybe looks at it and says, hey man, like, what's a way that your culture can kind of elevate above its more baser instincts, right? What's a way that you can take your culture and maybe elevate it to a place that is in sacrifice and in service to God? That's something that I think we don't talk enough about. I think we spend a lot of time talking about the negatives of both culture, but the better question is how do I take the instinct to want to conquer, learn from it, even, you know, right? Because this is the funny thing. I was going to say this. When all my friends that are white guys are all systemized. Their mind is just all systems and organization and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that like brothers don't have that, but like me personally, I'm not that way, right? So when I meet a guy that knows something I don't know, I ask him a question. How do you do that? You know what I'm saying? And I think instead of trying to like, oh yeah, these guys don't ever do this because I got this, and I'm better than you because I can do it. The better question is like, man, how do you do that? I want you to teach me how to do that. You know what I'm saying? And then as we develop a friendship, maybe call out some ways in which I could do whatever it is that I do in a way that's beneficial. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
No, please. I need you to do me a favor. I really have to go to the bathroom, which has never happens to me on a podcast, but it's happening today, and I'm losing my mind. So I'm going to trust you with my stream while I go be able to focus. You want to tell a story about your son? You want to tell a story about Suburban Farm Guy? I'm losing my mind right now.
Go ahead. You're good. Do it. I'll handle it with care. Oh man. Okay. So let me see if I can get in these chats, man. See what y'all talking about. Greetings from Germany. Oh man, we got folks from Germany in here. Wow. It's awesome. It's awesome. I don't have any material to talk about. But I will say that me and Will have been friends for a good while. We've had a lot of good conversations centered around this topic of race. You guys should go check that out. We got like 5 more episodes outside of that. I'm gonna plug my stuff actually while I'm doing it. So I've got a podcast that'll be coming out pretty soon that I've been working on. I took a break from. I had a podcast originally called Being a Husband, and it was centered around fatherhood, marriage from a man's perspective, biblically. And it was a good run. We had a good run. I think I said all that I needed to say, though. And so I've got another podcast project that I've been working on very, very diligently, very slowly. That is going to be coming out in the top of June. We're really the bottom of June. And it's a podcast that's about it's a lot of fiction stories that I've been working on, but it's about men and their path to power and what that does to them. And these particular stories are more so tragedies. There is a redemptive story that'll be released at the end of this whole series. But the first part of the series is a lot of drama, a lot of tragedies, a lot of bad news about men that get lost in this kind of path to power. And I wrote it because, I mean, I had a dream about it, and I don't want to get into that on here. It's a long story, but I wrote these because I found that a lot of guys that I talked with about their paths to power. Oh, Will's back. A lot of people that I talk with about their paths to power all have similar through lines. And so I really think that it's an important thing to have a conversation around. I see it as more or less a conversation that I'd like to have with my sons when they get of age to prepare them, because every man that's going to be formidable in the world is going to take a path to power. And I want them to be aware of the pitfalls that come with that. So that project will be out bottom of June, Tales from the West. Please check it out. I will make sure to post about it and get back on Instagram and all that good stuff. Shout out to everybody in the chat, and we're glad to have you back. And Will is looking like he is in a better spot now after the Russian.
I was suffering, dude. It's like I've had 5-hour podcasts where it's like I'm good, and
the one podcast.
Anyway, so we were talking. I'm glad that you're telling people you're talking about Tales from the West. It sounds like.
Yep. We were talking about it. So I was just trying to have a conversation with them about it, because I think it dovetails with a lot of what we're talking about, because whether it's the Diddy thing or the Drake thing, it's like, man, the path to power is a very slippery slope, man, and you have to go with God, and you have to be very careful where you walk, because you can lose yourself. You can lose yourself in it. So yeah, that's what I was talking about.
That's right. Yeah. So we were talking about what is a God honoring way to get power. And I think that's a really interesting question, because I mean, I think it was probably true in the early half of the 20th century that there were very few non-Christians, at least culturally, who were in any meaningful positions of power in the United States and Europe. And now there are none, right? And so I don't know that it's been several generations. No, I don't think there are any. So I think it's been several generations since anyone has had any concept of what righteous power looks like.
Yeah.
We haven't seen it. Like all of our institutions, medicine, law, finance, science, the arts, sports, all of that, they're all corrupt.
Yeah.
Right. And so we don't have a good model of what righteous, godly power looks like. I remember thinking about this a number of years ago. Like, if I were to try and name this would have been 3-4 years ago. If I were to try and name one celebrity, just one man who modeled the best of masculinity in a healthy way, in a healthy aspirational way. I struggled to think of even one. The closest I could get to at the time was Steph Curry, because he's a family man, highly accomplished, right? I don't think he still has the edge that he used to, but like very accomplished, but that wasn't his role, right? Right. So I can't think of examples of healthy fatherhood, healthy masculinity, healthy power in the world anymore. And so this question of what does a God honoring use of power look like?
Yeah.
Man, I don't know if I mean, to some extent, we can't imagine something unless we can see it.
Yeah.
So if we can't see it, how do we imagine it?
How do we know that it exists or that it can
That's
happen?
right.
Yeah, but scripture is really, really clear. I mean, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord and he'll lift you up, right? I mean, the pride cometh before fall. So every man that lifts himself up is going to be laid low. It's an inevitability, but God does raise people up. I mean, he did, and a lot of the patriarchs, as Abraham or David. Now, here's the thing, though. This is the thing, is that the temptations are the same, whether you're a man of God or not. So as God elevates you, you're not without temptation. And in some ways you have a bit of free will to contend with. David's a good example of that. God put David where he was. But David wasn't without temptation. And the temptation came when he wasn't focused on the mission that God had him on. He was supposed to be out at war, and he's perusing around, scratching his belly button, trying to figure out where he's going to get his next piece from. And then he sees Bathsheba, right? Ruins her life. Okay. They have a miscarriage, and then she has Solomon, and Solomon doubles down on the foolishness of his dad. Right. And so that's another thing, is like, to the fathers that are listening, how you walk in your path to power is going to impact your kids in a major way. And so the question that you had was, how do we know that it exists if we've not seen it? I think that Christ is obviously the best example of that. That there was a power that he had, being the Son of God, and he used that on behalf and in service to us. Like, that's the model. The model isn't, how do I leverage my position to get what I want, but how do I leverage my position to serve God and serve my neighbor? And so there's some Greek thinkers that had this concept around the philosopher king, and there wasn't a lot. A lot of them said the same thing. There's just not a lot of examples to point to with philosopher kings. There's not a lot of examples of men that get power and that do right with it. I think it's something that we whether we want to or not, we're going to, again, whether you want to or not, as a man, you're going to go on a path to power at some point, right? Or you're just going to wind up being miserable, right? And hating your situation. You're going to go on a path to become a competent, well-rounded man in whatever fashion that looks like for you. Okay. Whatever industry you're in, whatever craft that you have, you're going to go on that path. The question is to not look around at your own parts and be like, look at me, I'm the man. You know what I'm saying? That's the tricky part. And so, can it be done? Not without God, right? I mean, what is it? Harder for a rich man to enter into heaven than for the camel to enter into the eye of a needle. And then he says, the disciples say, well, who's going to go to heaven? And Jesus is like, without God, none of y'all jokers. Is only going to be, I'm paraphrasing, Jesus didn't say that.
No, I think I remember that verse.
But with God, nothing is impossible. And so I think that the inevitability of the path to power is going to happen. how I'm approaching it, I can't tell you exactly like how it's going to look for you, but how I'm approaching it is I'm having friends like Will. I'm having my connection with my dad. I'm having people that hold me accountable to say, hey man, this is the man that you said that you were. This is the man that you said you wanted to be. Is that real, or were you just bullshitting me? And I think every guy needs that accountability, because without the accountability of God, and certainly without the accountability of God and brothers, there's no way that you make it out of here without ruining shit on your path to power. It's just no.
So I have a lot of different directions I want to go with that, but I know that you have to go probably in just a minute. You have a hard stop in a minute, right? Am I reading the time correct?
I do, yeah. My wife, full disclosure, my wife is pregnant with our second. Very excited about that, but she is very, very tired, and I'm trying to do the kind thing, and I'm trying to take my son. But where do you want to go in 3 minutes?
To bring it all back, I think the thing that I've been saying, and I've said it to you, is as I see evangelical Protestants as having abandoned 3 specific groups with the gospel in the 20th century. The first was women, and that's feminism. I think they abandoned Jews with the gospel and stopped evangelizing the Jewish people. I think that's a problem. But I see them as also having abandoned the Black community. And so is it possible, or how do you see the gospel working its way back into the Black community? And maybe you can also just, in closing, tie that with what happened with Kanye West, who a lot of people said he seemed sincere for a while, and then absolutely is like, well, I'm not God, and so I'm out or whatever. God didn't do what I want, so I'm out. Like, so maybe you can do that real quick, and then we can wrap up, and you can go be a husband and father.
Super dad, right? Something like that. We need to do a part 2, because that's man. So the question, give me the question again, so I make sure I get it right.
Yeah. So how can we bring the gospel back into the Black community, the real gospel, right? That ties in all these pieces together, that values fathers, and that gets out of hindbrain thinking, and that promotes responsibility and reconciliation and patriarchy. I know it's a giant ask, but I think it needs to be done.
I would say in the South, it's definitely more present and more here. The challenge is that, oh man, I would say the Black Hebrew Israelite stuff and Islam have actually been really, really good at recruiting Black men.
Oh, wow.
Because they allow men to be men in a way that, like, a more soft, cerebral, spiritual, feely church just doesn't. And so I think, you asked me, how do we get the real gospel back there? It's there in pockets, but the question is really, how do we get it back in mass? It's going to have to be, we're going to have to start preaching to men specifically, and not in a way that is, bashing them on Father's Day, but in a way that's saying, hey man, you have so much significance and impact in your community, but more specifically in your family than you know. If you don't take hold of your children and the responsibility you have to your children, your sons are going to be left to the vultures, the culture vultures, the people that frankly would rather see them dead or in jail or pimped out. And that's what you're left with, frankly. And so I think about, there was a time when I was running my business, Suburban Farm Guy, you mentioned that. There was a time when I was running that business that I thought that, well, if I just prioritize making sure that I grow the business and I can kind of let my family slide for a little bit, then when the 10 years is up that I've scaled my business, then I can come back to the family at that point and it'll all be good. But something that God made really clear to me during that time is that I don't have that kind of time. I'm not even promised 10 years. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And you leave a lot of opportunity for other influence when you take your foot off the gas. And so that message of their importance and their significance, and not just, hey, you guys need to straighten up and fly right. It's like, no, that, but also you don't know how valuable you actually are, brother. You are a pillar to your community. God actually wants you to lead your family and this community. And you've got to get your head out of your butt and into the game of life. This is serious business. Souls are at stake. People are dying and going to hell, right? So, and that could be your kids if you leave them to the devices of the culture vultures and the world system. And so, preaching a message, I would say, of inspiration to call men up to the task that we have. We got to, I mean, I would say, if we're talking about, metaphors about civilizations, ours is in ruins, and we have to build it. We have to build it. And the only way that we're going to build it is with God. The only way to build it the right way is to do it with God. We've seen guys build it, culture vulture types. Diddy's built buildings. He's made jobs. He's done all this stuff. But look at him now. Look at him now, right? We've seen Jay do it. Look at him now, right? What was it really for? Was it for them? Was it for you? Was it for your kids? Nobody's going to do a better job at making sure that your kids know God and live right than you as a father. And I take that really serious. And so I think more messages centered around that is what's going to help us build it. But it's the step one is taking it back from the vultures, man. And step two is redeeming it. And I'm here for it.
I'm here for it too. What a beautiful note to end on. Thank you. That's just, that is the message. That's the only message that matters. And pray to God that message spreads in the right way across our culture. Thank you, man. It's really good to see you. Do you have anywhere you want to send people to find out more about you and what you do? Anything that you're active on right now where people can support you, or is that coming later?
None right now, but if you wanna email me at my personal email, because I don't have all the business stuff set up yet. Email me at my personal email, jonathanbwest@gmail.com. I'll direct you to all the fun stuff, but that's a way that you and I can stay in contact in the meantime, because I'm cooking on the low. You can't see everything I'm doing right now, but we'll release it. We'll serve it up here in a little bit.
Let him cook.
Yeah. Title the podcast, Let Him Cook. That's what it needs to be, man.
Just gonna rename the whole thing. Yeah. All right, man. Go enjoy your night with your family. It's been really good to see you and really good to catch up. I've super enjoyed this.
Dude, this was a good time, man. Take it easy. Good to see y'all.